When my fiancé laughed about being my sugar baby to his friends, I decided to become exactly what he thought I was, someone who could afford to destroy him. My name is Elise Hartman, and I'm 29 years old. I've never been the kind of woman people turn to look at twice on the street. But I worked harder than most to build a life that made me proud, a stable tech career, a quiet apartment, a small circle of friends who felt like family. I used to think that was enough, until I met Ben. Ben was 25, model material, in every sense, sharp jawline, ocean blue eyes, the kind of smile that could sell sin as sincerity. I met him at a mutual friend's photo shoot. He spilled coffee on my laptop by accident, then spent the next week making it up to me with texts that made my stomach flutter. I told myself it wasn't the way I looked that caught his attention, but the way I made him laugh. I should have known better. 6 months into our whirlwind romance, he started dropping hints about marriage. Not pressure exactly, just little comments like, we'd make such a photogenic couple at our wedding, or imagine the kind of house we'd have together. It felt flattering, intoxicating. I'd never had someone look at me like I was worth planning a future with. So I proposed to him 7 months after our first date. I still remember his shocked smile, his hands trembling as he said yes. My parents thought it was fast. My friends thought it was reckless. But I was in love. Or maybe I was in love with the idea that someone like him could love me back. For a while, it was good movie nights, shared playlists, long walks that made the city feel like ours. He moved in just 2 months after we started dating, saying rent was too high on his own. I didn't think twice. I had space, I had money, and I had him. That illusion shattered 3 months ago. Ben had invited a few of his model friends over to help with wedding planning. I was homesick that day, dizzy from a fever, half asleep in the bedroom. Laughter drifted down the hall, his deep voice among them, warm and playful. Then suddenly my name. I sat up. "Elise is great," one of the girls said. "You really scored with her, huh?" And Ben's reply, light and lazy. "Oh yeah, I bagged myself a sugar mommy. She pays for everything. It's like living on easy mode." The room erupted in laughter. My skin went cold. I thought I'd misheard. But then he added, chuckling, "She's sweet, though, just a bit plain. You know, one of those dependable women who make life comfortable while you chase your dreams." More laughter. Someone clinked a glass. And then a voice, his again lower this time. "Hey, if she wants to play provider, who am I to stop her?" I remember every syllable, every cruel echo. I didn't storm out. I didn't scream. I just stood behind the door frozen, hearing the sound of my own heartbeat pounding louder than their laughter. Every joke burned through me. Humiliation, betrayal, disbelief. When the laughter finally died, I walked quietly back to the bedroom and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked the same as always. Tired, ordinary, unthreatening. I used to like that about myself. But that night, I saw someone else. A woman with eyes sharp enough to cut glass. A woman whose silence could be more dangerous than rage. If Ben thought I was just a wallet with a pulse, I'd show him what that heart could do when broken. The next few days, I played my role perfectly. I kissed him good morning, packed his protein shakes, listened to him talk about photo shoots. Every "I love you" that left my mouth felt like a rehearsal for an ending he couldn't see coming. Sometimes late at night, I'd replay that conversation in my head, every cruel laugh, every shallow word. Instead of crying, I'd take mental notes. Who his friends were, what agencies he mentioned, which names mattered in his world. Because I'd already started planning. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about power, the kind I didn't even realize I'd lost until I heard how small he thought I was. One morning, as he left for an audition, he leaned down to kiss my forehead and said, "You're my lucky charm, you know that." I smiled up at him. "Then I guess you'd better keep me close." He laughed, not realizing that beneath that calm smile, something inside me had already changed. Love had died that day in the living room, but something far colder and far stronger had taken its place. I didn't sleep much the week after I overheard Ben. Every night, I'd lie there next to him, pretending to drift off while his breathing evened out, imagining what it would feel like to tell him I knew everything. But every time I stopped myself, not because I forgave him, but because I wanted him to think I had. That's when I remembered Ian, my younger cousin, 23, a beautiful disaster. He had everything money could buy except approval. His father, a cold-faced business tycoon, hated his decision to pursue modeling. Ian didn't lack looks or drive, just connections, the one thing Ben had plenty of. Months earlier, I'd wanted to help Ian network, but Ben had frowned when I mentioned it. "You know how competitive that world is, babe," he'd said. "If your cousin gets the same gigs I do, it'll just be awkward. Let him figure it out himself." I'd listened then, but now his words sounded different, almost territorial, and suddenly helping Ian didn't just seem right, it seemed strategic. So one evening, while Ben was out with friends, I called Ian. His voice burst through the phone, warm and restless. Elise, wow, it's been forever. What's up? We talked for hours. He told me how his father cut off his funding, how he'd been couch hopping trying to land real gigs. His tone was tired but proud. You know, I said I might be able to help you, but there's a catch. Silence, then a curious laugh. You sound like my dad. No, I said. Your dad charges interest. I want partnership. And just like that, we struck a deal. I'd connect him to agencies, photographers, and casting calls, all the ones I had access to through Ben. In return, he'd send me half of whatever he earned. It wasn't about the money, not entirely. It was about control. Every dollar that came in was proof that I could use Ben's world against him without him ever realizing. The first week, I simply listened. I noted every name Ben dropped, every client he complained about, every friend he bragged to. I memorized them all like chess pieces. Then I started moving them quietly. I forwarded casting call emails that Ben ignored. I took screenshots of his contacts and slipped them to Ian. Sometimes Ian landed the job. Sometimes he didn't. But every time he did, he texted me half cent. Thank you, genius. That first payment hit my account $1,500. A strange warmth spread through me, not excitement, but satisfaction. For once, I was the one being rewarded for someone else's arrogance. Ben didn't notice a thing. If anything, he grew more affectionate. He brought me flowers after his shoots, cooked pasta that was always too salty, kissed me goodnight. His guilt, maybe. Or maybe he just liked the security of being loved by the person he mocked. One evening, he leaned against the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone. Hey, babe, guess what he said, smiling? They're casting for that new agency campaign I told you about. I'm thinking of going. Oh, I asked, casually stirring the pot. What's it for? He told me everything. I nodded, pretending to be interested. That same night, I texted Ian the details. 2 weeks later, Ian booked it. When Ben found out, he was furious, though he didn't know why. He came home storming, muttering curses under his breath. Some rookie with zero experience stole the spot he complained. Probably slept his way in. I almost laughed. If only you knew. That night, while Ben sulked, I transferred another cut from Ian's payment into my savings account. The numbers grew, but so did my guilt. Each success made me feel a strange combination of power and emptiness. Revenge didn't taste like victory. It tasted like metal, sharp and cold. Still, I couldn't stop. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at Ben across the table, wondering what would happen if I told him the truth. Would he beg? Would he rage? Or worse, would he smirk and tell me he always knew I was capable of this? So I stayed quiet. I played the role he'd written for me, the sweet, reliable fiancé who believed every word he said. I even joined him on a few outings with his friends again, smiling when they called me lucky for landing a man like him. Inside, I was somewhere else, entirely in control, untouchable, and a little afraid of who I was becoming. Because late at night, after Ian sent me his usual thank you messages, I'd stare at my reflection and whisper, "What are you doing, Elise?" And the reflection would always answer, finishing what he started. 2 months passed before Ben noticed that something had shifted between us. He'd still wrap his arms around me in the morning, still kiss me before leaving for his shoots, but his touch had become automatic, routine. Like everything else about him, I was no better. Every smile I gave him was rehearsed. Every "I love you," a prop line from a play I no longer believed in. But I kept the act going because I wasn't done yet. By now, Ian's career had taken off. He was booking back-to-back campaigns, shaking hands with people Ben could only dream of meeting. He'd text me photos from glossy studios, and every time my phone buzzed with another transfer notification, I'd feel that dangerous thrill again. Then one afternoon, Ben came home humming. I was working from the couch, half listening. Guess what he said, dropping a pile of glossy papers on the coffee table? Invitations. We should pick a design tonight. We're running behind. I looked at the swirling cursive fonts and gold edges. The words felt distant, like props from someone else's life. Sure, I said softly, pretending to study them. Let's do that. But later that night, when he fell asleep, I opened my laptop and quietly emailed my parents. Please don't order the venue deposit. There won't be a wedding. I'll explain soon. My mother's reply came minutes later. Are you sure? I typed back, completely. I didn't tell them why. I didn't tell anyone. Because the next morning, Ben was in the kitchen, frying eggs like nothing was wrong. And for a moment, I hated how easy it was for him, how easily he could joke, how effortlessly he could pretend we were happy. When Ian landed a campaign with a top modeling agency, he sent me $5,000 as a thank you. It was far more than our usual deal, but I accepted it anyway. I told myself I deserved it. That night, as I checked my bank balance, Ben leaned over my shoulder. Whoa, where's that from? Did your company give you a bonus? I minimized the screen. Freelance work, I lied. Small side projects. He smiled, kissed my cheek. Look at you, my little hustler. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because if I didn't, I might scream. A week later, he brought up the wedding again. We need to send out invitations this week, he said, scrolling through his phone. People are asking about dates. I nodded. My heart didn't even flinch. Then we should talk. He looked up confused. Talk about what? About the fact that there isn't going to be a wedding. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the clock ticking in the living room. He blinked, a confused laugh escaping his throat. Wait, what, are you joking? No, Ben, I said quietly. I'm done pretending. His confusion turned to anger in an instant. What the hell are you talking about? I took a slow breath and met his eyes. I heard you, that day with your friends. You called me your sugar mommy, remember? His jaw dropped. You were listening? I was, I said. And every time you smiled at me after that, I wondered how you managed it. He started pacing. Elise, come on. That was a joke. Everyone was drinking. A joke, I repeated, nodding. Yeah, I figured. Which is why I decided to make one too. He frowned, confused. What are you talking about? I leaned back in the chair, calm and deliberate. You know my cousin Ian, the one you told me not to help because he might become your competition. He froze. He's doing well these days, I continued. Really well. Turns out all the contacts I gave him, the ones I got from you, paid off. Wait, what do you mean, my contacts? I mean the gigs you mentioned, the agencies you bragged about, the photographers you worked with. I fed all that to Ian. Every detail. His face went pale. You're lying. No, I'm not. He stared at me like I'd grown another head. So what, you used me? You used me to help your cousin make money. I used you, I said evenly to remind myself I could. Ben slammed his palm against the counter. You're insane. I shrugged. Maybe. But you're the one who built this version of me. He looked at me like he didn't recognize the woman standing in front of him. And maybe he didn't, because the Elise he'd known, the quiet, adoring one who laughed at his jokes and paid for his dreams, had died the moment he reduced her to a wallet with legs. He whispered, voice shaking, so this was all revenge. I met his eyes. No, Ben, this was accounting. He stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed his jacket and stormed out. The door slammed behind him, and for a few seconds I stood there frozen in the echo. Then slowly I sat down, folded my hands on the table and exhaled. It was over, or so I thought. For 2 whole days after Ben walked out, the apartment was quiet, almost too quiet. His cologne still lingered in the air, mixed with the faint smell of burnt coffee and dust from the spot where his sneakers used to pile up near the door. I told myself I didn't miss him, that I missed the noise, the illusion of a life shared. But deep down, silence has a way of echoing the things you try not to admit. By the 3rd morning, I woke to a message from him. Ben, I still love you, Elise. What I said was stupid. I can't believe I hurt you like that. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long time. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, wanting to type something. Anything. But nothing came. Instead, I locked my phone and tossed it across the bed. I wanted to believe him. A small, pathetic part of me still did. The same part that had said yes to his proposal, that had believed his promises of forever. But another voice, colder, sharper, whispered, he's only sorry now because you stopped being useful. I didn't reply. That afternoon, I buried myself in work. Coding was easier than feeling. Numbers never lied. People did. By evening, the guilt started to crawl in. Not because I missed him, but because I wasn't sure who I'd become. When had my revenge stopped being justice and started feeling like addiction? I told myself I'd done the right thing. But if that was true, why did my chest ache every time I walked past his empty side of the bed? Later that night, my phone buzzed again, but it wasn't Ben this time. It was a number I didn't recognize. Unknown. Hey, Elise, you don't know me, but I think you should see this. Attached was a screenshot. It was a group chat, Ben's name highlighted at the top. My stomach tightened as I read the messages. Ben need a couch to crash on till the loser X caves and lets me move back in, LOL. Friend 1. Damn what happened. Ben long story. She flipped out over a joke. I'll stay till she cools off or finds someone new. Friend 2. Still calling her sugar mommy Ben. Of course. She was paying for everything. Old habits die hard. My hands trembled. My heart didn't just sink, it plummeted. The message continued. Unknown. I'm one of his friends. I couldn't stomach the way he talks about you. Thought you should know before you waste your time. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I'd been seconds away from replying to his apology earlier, from giving him another chance. And now, reading this, it felt like the universe was mocking me for almost forgetting. I typed back to the stranger, "Thank you." Then I blocked Ben's number. No dramatic speech, no closure, just silence, the kind that ends things for good. That night, I sat in the dark, the glow of my laptop screen flickering across the room. I opened a document I hadn't touched in months, my wedding planning list. Venues, flowers, invitations, dress ideas. All of it meaningless now. I selected everything. Pressed delete. Gone. Then, without thinking, I opened my banking app and sent half of Ian's latest payment to a charity for women rebuilding after financial abuse. It wasn't enough to cleanse my conscience, but it was something. For the first time in weeks, I felt the faintest flicker of peace, fragile, trembling, but real. The next morning, I woke to sunlight instead of bitterness. I made coffee for one. It didn't taste as bitter as it used to. Maybe that's the cruelest thing about revenge. It doesn't end when the other person is punished. It ends when you finally realize it didn't heal you either. As I stared out the window, I whispered to myself, "You're free now. Don't look back." But that freedom was short-lived, because less than a week later, Ben showed up at my office. He showed up on a Tuesday. The day had been ordinary until then. Rain streaking the glass keyboards, clicking that dull hum of productivity that made time feel safe and predictable. I was in the middle of debugging a client's site when the receptionist's voice crackled through the intercom. "Elise, there's someone here asking for you. He says his name is Ben." My pulse stopped for a beat, then started again, too fast, too loud. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't here, but the curiosity, or maybe the old ache, won. I walked downstairs. He was standing in the lobby like he belonged there, clean-shaven, perfectly dressed, holding an umbrella still dripping onto the tile. The same face I once woke up next to, now looking both nervous and smug. "Hey," he said softly, eyes darting toward the people at the front desk. "Can we talk?" I hesitated. Every instinct screamed no. But the thought of him raising his voice, creating a scene in front of my coworkers was worse, so I nodded once. We walked across the street to a cafe. He picked a corner table as if we were meeting for a first date instead of the wreckage of our last goodbye. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You look good," he said. "You look the same," I replied. Cold. Flat. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was heavier than any argument could have been. Finally, he leaned forward. "Elise, I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us. About the woman you called your sugar mommy." He winced, then exhaled like a man rehearsing regret. "I was stupid. You know that? I said things I didn't mean." "You meant every word I said," voice calm. "People don't joke that easily about what they don't believe." He looked away, then back at me. "Fine, maybe I did. But you didn't exactly act innocent either, did you?" I stayed silent. "I know about your cousin. Ian," he said, the name bitter on his tongue. "You used me to build his career. You think I wouldn't find out?" My stomach clenched, but I didn't flinch. "Then you already know why I did it," he scoffed. "You think that makes it better?" "You used me, Elise. That's sick." I leaned forward, my voice low. "You taught me how. You made me the student of your selfishness." For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. His jaw tensed. His fingers fidgeted with the sugar packet on the table. "You've changed," he said finally. "You mean I stopped worshiping you?" "I mean you've turned cold," he snapped. "You were gentle once. You cared." "And you turned my care into currency," I shot back. "So tell me, Ben, which one of us really changed first?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. I could see it now, the confusion, the bruised ego of a man who had never expected to be powerless in front of the woman he underestimated. He leaned back, crossing his arms. "You know what's crazy? I actually find this version of you attractive. The confidence, the fire. If you'd been like this from the start, maybe things would have worked." I almost laughed. "So you're saying you'd love me more if I hated you sooner?" He smiled, half serious. "Maybe." I shook my head. "No, Ben. You don't love me. You love the challenge. You only want what doesn't need you anymore." He went quiet. His facade cracked for just a second, revealing that small, desperate boy underneath the arrogance. "Elise," he said quietly, "can't we just start over?" "Start over from where? The joke, the betrayal, or the moment you decided I was just an accessory in your success story?" He didn't answer. I stood up, pushing my chair back. The legs scraped against the tile with a sound that turned heads. "You wanted a sugar mommy," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "Congratulations, you can't afford me anymore." He blinked, stunned, as I reached into my bag, dropped a few bills on the table, and walked away. Outside, the rain had started again. My reflection in the cafe window looked almost unfamiliar. Eyes darker, posture straighter, a hint of calm behind the exhaustion. For the first time, I didn't feel small next to his memory. I didn't feel used or humiliated or desperate to prove anything. I just felt done. I thought that would be the end of it. But a week later, he called again, this time from a friend's phone, and what he said next would change everything. The call came late at night, a number I didn't recognize flashing across my screen like a ghost I hadn't laid to rest. I almost ignored it. But something in me, that quiet part that still wanted finality, made me answer. Elise. His voice familiar, steady wrong. You're using someone else's phone now, I asked coldly. You blocked me everywhere, for a reason. Then just hear me out. He sounded calm, this time too calm. Not the desperate Ben from the cafe, not the arrogant boy who mocked me to his friends. There was something deliberate in his tone, something careful, as if he'd practiced this speech. I've been thinking about what you said, he continued. About how I used you, about how you used me. Maybe we're not that different. I didn't reply. You made me feel powerless, he said. And maybe I deserve that. But you don't get to play God, Elise. You don't get to decide who gets punished and who doesn't. A bitter laugh escaped me. You think this was about punishment? Wasn't it? Silence stretched between us, filled with the ghosts of everything we'd both done wrong. You know what the difference between us is, Ben, I finally said. You mocked me to feel powerful. I hurt you because I already was. He inhaled sharply like he'd been struck. You're proud of that. No, I said. I'm ashamed. But I learned something from you. Power doesn't heal. It only reminds you how much you bled. He was quiet for a long time. Then with a small broken laugh, he said, I miss the old you. The one who smiled when I came home, who believed in me. You killed her, I said softly. And I killed what was left of you. Maybe that makes us even. Even, he repeated. Sure. Then the line went dead. The next morning, I couldn't focus on anything. His words lingered. You don't get to play God. Maybe he was right. I'd rewritten the story so many times in my head that I'd stopped seeing where the justice ended and the cruelty began. I went to therapy that week. I sat across from a woman with kind eyes who didn't flinch when I told her everything. The humiliation, the plan, the manipulation. She didn't judge. She just asked. And how did it feel when you won? I didn't know what to say, because it hadn't felt like victory. It had felt like staring into a mirror and seeing his reflection in my own eyes. So I started working on something new, forgiveness. Not for him, for me. Forgiveness for the version of myself that thought love meant giving everything until nothing was left. Weeks passed. The wounds began to close unevenly, but they closed. I blocked the last of his mutual friends. I redecorated the apartment. Threw out the wine glasses we'd bought together. The space felt lighter. Then one morning, as I sat by the window sipping coffee, a message came through from an unknown number. Unknown. Ian just booked an international campaign, couldn't have done it without you. I smiled, but this time there was no thrill, no vengeance, just quiet pride. I typed back, tell him to pay it forward, help someone else who needs it. Then I deleted the chat. Later that night I wrote a letter, not to send, not to post, just to write. Dear Ben, you once joked that I was your sugar mommy. Maybe I was. I paid for your comfort, your ego, your silence, but I also paid the price for loving you. It cost me my softness. You used to say you love my kindness. I hope someday when the noise fades, you remember that you helped destroy it. But here's what you didn't expect, I rebuilt it. For myself, not for you. I folded the letter and set it on fire over the kitchen sink. The paper curled, blackened, then vanished into smoke. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a villain or a victim. I felt human. The next morning, I packed a bag, left the city, and drove until the skyline turned into open road. No destination, just distance. And as the sun broke through the clouds, I whispered the words I'd never had the courage to say out loud. You were right, Ben. I'm not God. A pause, a faint, almost smile. But I am finally free.